This is the 19th season of Bass Talk Live. BTL is presented by Bass Cat Boats, Strike King Lures, Aftco, Pro Guide Batteries, X-Zone Lures, Shoreline Boat and RV Repair, Spro, Gamakatsu, Big Bite Baits, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, Beatdown Outdoors, and Sunline.
BTL coming at you.
Good morning and welcome to another exciting edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we are going to talk about bass fishing, wrapping up the first full week in studio in a while, and then we'll be out of studio next week, the 4th Bassmaster Open EQ on Wheeler Lake. Hopefully I'll be able to find something other than eelgrass. All my research is saying eelgrass, which I might have to go back to the day 4 of how Frank said they sit. I don't know. We will have day 4 though on Thursday. Frank will be back on Thursday. Got a dual guest show today. We're going to start things out with Scott Palmer, the owner of the Bass Tank. Folks, frankly, there's been some big changes over at the Bass Tank. They've been a long-time supporter, a staple. You know, both Scott Palmer and John have been on the show to really break things down from the technology standpoint. The Bass Tank really exploded onto the scene. Perfect timing. We'll talk a little bit with Scott about kind of the timing of the Bass Tank and the explosion of how it went with forward-facing sonar, all the different brands. But Scott now running the ship over at the Bass Tank. We'll talk with him, and then we will jump over to the West Coast. Big shout out to Josh Bertrand for getting up early, 6:45 his time. The reigning and defending U.S. Open champion, coming off a 5th place finish in the MLF BPT General Tire Heavy Hitters presented by Bass Pro Show. Woo, that's a mouthful there, but top 5 finish there for Josh Bertrand. But I have not talked to him about this, but we're going to do an entire episode on guiding. How to select a guide, understanding what to bring, what makes a good guide, what your expectation should be in the boat. Do you tip? Do you not tip? Are you in the front? Should the guide fish? Should the guide not fish? Josh, he does Anglers Happy Hour with another guide and is a longtime guide out there in Arizona. So we're going to dive into that as we're approaching the part of the season. I'm actually going up the end of July to Lake Erie to do 3 days of guiding with Michael Simonton for some jumbo perch with my dad. So we'll get that perspective and aspect from Josh Bertrand, and I'm sure we'll dive into some fishing stuff as well. But all right, let's get to our first guest today, none other than the Bass Tank's Scott Palmer. Scott, thanks for jumping on BTL this morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, as always.
I think that's legit. I feel like when it comes to guiding, like there's a bunch of nuances and things that people either don't understand, and you can get into something that you're not expecting. Or, I think the more you know, the more you expect, the more communication. I've never done a show on that. And I think Josh would be a great guy to talk about that. Or have you ever hired a guide? Or I know you've probably done some guiding in your day as well.
Yeah. And that's it. I've kind of been on both sides of it. When I lived down in Dallas, I was in school. I was close to Lake Fork, had never fished Fork. And I said, I've got to go get on Fork. Well, I was a broke college kid. I couldn't afford a boat. And so my only option was to hire a guide. And I did. And it was that late March period. And not only did he take me out and get me on Fork, but, he taught me how to sight fish. And up to that point, I really had never sight fished because Oklahoma, we don't really have a whole lot of lakes that you can do that. And, he taught, honestly, that's where really pitching and flipping was where he started to kind of explaining it down. So, I think if you go pick a guide, you go pick one that you mesh well with. I used him several times over the years, but I didn't even need to after I had a boat, but I just liked him. And, so it just kind of developed a relationship. And, to me, that's the cool part of it. But on the guide side, I don't envy them at all. It seems like a cool gig, and some of them love it, obviously, or they wouldn't do it. But man, by the time they, have to rig all their tackle up and get in bed just to get up early the next they'd do it all over again. Let's call a spade a spade. A lot of people they have in there are coming to learn, and they may not be the best with a bait caster. Think about how many backlashes you and I go through in the course of a day. And now you can put people, maybe they're not familiar with a bait caster at first, they're not the best. They're trying to hone their skills. So you got to go clean all that stuff out. So it's an interesting dynamic. I think it's great. I think it helps get people on the water. And obviously it provides a living for some of these guys as well. So it's a unique subject. I think it's a good subject.
It is. But because here's the deal. You've got two new, is it niche or niche? Is it a niche? Like two new kind of subcultures of this guiding. So you have the, and you're very familiar with this, you have the training and experience side of it, which would be like electronics, where you could go out with, you're not offering this now currently, as I believe, but I know it's where you go out and there's different guys who do it where, hey, we're not really going to fish. We might pull a rod out, but I'm going to dial in your units. I'm going to teach you how to read your map. I'm going to teach you the forward facing sonar. It's an on the water electronics class. Basically you're hiring a guide for that. And then there's also what's going down at OHIV. Like I'm good buddies with Rick down at Hill Country Hammers. And like, I'm talking to him, and they're putting people on the fish of a lifetime on a daily basis, but it's almost like hunting, where these guys aren't going down going, I can't wait to catch fish. They're going down booking 3 days to catch one fish. And they 100% experience it. And you're talking sometimes pushing four figures, $1,000 to do this. And then you have the, hey, I want to take my kid out and catch some striper down at Texoma with a shad who can't catch. So there's a wide range of it. And I think as long as you know what you're getting into, anyway, I'm excited to talk to Josh about that.
No, I think it's a great subject for your show, honestly, because it is part of this market that kind of rarely gets talked about and never really gets the publicity that it might need. And it's a huge part of our industry. We have a lot of customers that are actually guides. I actually just got back from Texoma, the Power, if I say this right, NCAA Power 5 equipment managers. So these are all the football equipment managers from the Power 5 conferences, got together and had a little, call it a striper tournament. They got together and it was a friendly, fun, quote unquote, tournament type deal. And so we did it last year and I helped to kind of put it together. Well, they had so much fun that it was actually just the Big 12 last year. And then this year it was the Power 5. And, it's really cool to watch those guys that they don't get to fish all that often. And some of them never fish. I was in a boat with a guy who had never caught a fish in his life, and he ended up catching our biggest fish. So, that's a huge part of our industry, and it's really fun. But then guides, as I'm sitting there talking to all these striper guides that are sitting there, every one of them had questions about their electronics, and so it's a big part of the game. And, guides, obviously we service a lot of guides and at the Bass Tank as well, because that is their living, kind of like us. Electronics are their living, their boats are their living. And so it all goes together, and it really doesn't get the publicity it probably deserves, quite honestly.
And I'm sure you've also seen a lot of just anglers come in and say, hey, I went out with so-and-so, they had this unit, they had this, can you hook me up with this now? Because now I want it on my boat, because after, spending a couple days with the guide, I feel like I can utilize it. So it also benefits a company like the Bass Tank as well to have guides set up.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. Absolutely it does. And a lot of times those, we hear that, well, why are you picking those specific units? That may not be the best for your application, what you're telling us. And I said, well, that's what the guide had. And I used it for a couple of days. And so I feel like I'm familiar with it. I don't want to try to learn something new. And it's like, okay. That's fair enough. And so, yeah, it's a huge part of it for sure.
All right, let's get into the business at hand. Like I said, I introduced you as the owner of the Bass Tank over the last years. The Bass Tank has not only sponsored BTL, but I'm friends with you. I've been friends with everybody over at the Bass Tank. And just to say it like it is, there's been a lot of major changes there over the past several months. The first and foremost, noticeably, if you follow the Elite Series, John Sukup now has a jersey on that says John Sukup Fishing. There's no Bass Tank wrap on him. We'll have John on still on BTL. There's a lot of people who followed his journey to the Elite Series. I love his perspective, like I said, but business is business. And from the way I've understood it, there's been some business that went down, and you are now the main primary sole owner of the Bass Tank, and it is Scott Palmer of the Bass Tank moving forward from here on out. Is that a fair way to state it, Scott?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
So that being said, that everyone's like, well, what's going to happen to the Bass Tank? You obviously have your 3 pillars, which is the fact that you're fishermen. So we just talked about that in the first segment. Customer service, which you guys have become synonymous with customer service, and then support and education, where if you've watched any of the BTLs that Scott's been on, dude, we can get into the weeds and go down the wormholes when it comes to that, which is something that I like. All 3 of those things still in play. And what does the Bass Tank currently look like, and what are your plans for it moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And all 3 of those things is what the company was founded on. And, that's what we're going to continue, and if anything else, we're just going to bolster those pillars. We've like you said, we've had some changes that were made, but going forward, we're going to bolster those pillars. I've got some really cool things that I think some people are going to be excited about coming up, and I've got to get some things in place before I can really talk about them, but I'm excited about that. The other big thing with the company, and this is kind of an industry-wide thing, but especially for us, for a while, inventory was a huge problem. Getting the supply chain issues we have. I mean, that's not a secret. It's really nice to see that we're finally starting to get back to some normalcy there. That I don't have to order something that I may not be able, that I've got to look 12 weeks out. So we're able to start, ordering less long term, if you will. I don't have to forecast for 6 months and say, what am I going to need in 6 months? Because that makes it really tough, as you can imagine. But, as a consumer, it's a lot easier that if I don't have something in stock, you can call me, we can order, and typically you have it just in the same amount of time. But it's making it a lot easier for us to control that. So that's a really big factor that really has nothing to do with anything that's happened at the company. That's just an industry thing. So we're really excited about that. We've got hired on a couple guys, and so bolstered our staff and got a really good staff in place, and really kind of I've laid my vision out in front of everybody, and they all seem to be really excited about it, and so we're pushing forward, and I was up at the shop. Several of them, let me back up. Several of them were at the shop with me last night. We had a boat that had a deadline of yesterday, and we were up there till after 11 getting it done. So, and don't get me wrong, we're not going to do that every day. Not going to do that every day, but that was just one of those things. So, really good buy-in right now, and looking forward to moving on.
But so the things that the Bass Tanks are known for, obviously providing product for all of the major brands, the mounts, the Garmin, Lowrance, Humminbird, all that stuff still doesn't change. Still available on the THEBassTank.com website.
That's actually absolutely right. TheBassTank.com.
The Ohio State University. TheBassTank.com.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And then still kind of in a transition period now as far as the installations and things, because for a couple years, like that was the jam. Like you guys had boats out the wazoo. But the plan is to work that back in as well too, to where it's a destination shop for installation and
100%. And we've been doing installs, but listen, in the course of any business, I don't care if it's the best place to work, the worst place to work, you're going to have guys that come and go over the course of time. It's just not going to be their cup of tea, and that's fine. I've always said I want you to go be happy. If you're not happy working, at the Bass Tank or with me, go be happy. That's perfectly acceptable. And there's not going to be hard feelings there. So there's been a little bit of turnover, but guys have had some really good opportunities in taking that. So we've had to draw down just a hair what we've done on installs, but we're that's what I said. We've hired some new staff, and we're bolstering that up again to really do it. And because right now, we are booked. I will tell you that we're still very booked on installs. I could probably hire about 4 or 5 more guys with the amount of install requests and what we've got on the schedule right now. And so people want it, and that's what we want to give them. You mentioned we sell Garmin, Lowrance, Humminbird, everything for sure. But I've always looked at this company as a customer service company that just so happens to sell a product, because at the end of the day, we do have bills that we have to pay, or there won't be a company. But customer service has to be the forefront of the company. That is the pillar. Without customers, you have no company. And so that's what we're focusing on for sure. And that's I'm excited about it. It's a lot of work, as you can imagine, but it's always been a lot of work. And I think I actually saw a picture of myself from a couple years ago. I'm like, man, I had less gray hairs back then. That's just a few years, and so. But,
I hear you.
It's worth it for sure.
All right, couple quick questions, and I'll let you go. One, what are your thoughts on the new power pole trolling motor?
So, just full disclosure, I want to take that thing apart and see what makes it tick, because that's who I am. I'm not going to, because they're hard to get right now. But we got some in, and I was, again, full disclosure, I was a little concerned on the price point. Let's just call a spade a spade. Things are getting more expensive every day for people. We all have bills to pay. And so I was a little concerned, but you know what? It has moved. It has, hey, good naming, but it has absolutely been selling. And so I'm excited about it. I'll be at ICAST, and I'm excited I've reached out to PowerPole, and they're going to kind of give me the real nuts and bolts and everything else on it. And I'm going to reserve judgment until I have time to really shake it down. Just like we do with everything.
Mm-hmm.
We, when the Force came out, when the Ghost came out, we took it out and we just hammered on them just to kind of figure out what made it tick. Unfortunately, there's not enough inventory of the Move trolling motor yet for me to be able to
just go out and try to destroy one.
Yeah. I just can't quite do that yet. And so, but if PowerPole's going to let me do it, I'll absolutely take them up on it. But but anyway, so I think it's going to be a player for sure. It's got a lot of cool things that we'll see. But like I said, the initial reaction from a end user standpoint has been positive, and so I'm excited to see what happens with it.
All right, next question. I need to get you down here in studio when things kind of quiet down, but before July, so June maybe. Does that sound like is June pretty booked for you? Probably that looked like a.
Well, I had to think about it. It's actually July. It's probably more booked. So,
and I'm gone all of July.
Yeah, so we can probably do it in June. Actually, that would probably be the best month, as long as it's after I get back from hammering smallmouth on the laps.
Yes.
So once
there'll be
a
gap there. Here's what I want though. It's got to be a show that's all about mapping. I want a full show of mapping because I want to know about C maps and Navionics and the Lake Master and the Garmin's and then the downloads that go with them and the things that I need. I am still behind on my mapping and I have little glimpses of it, but then I'll be with a buddy who will have something on his phone and I'll be like, why don't I have that? And he's like, oh, look, you can just hit every point that these subtle secondary channel swings go. And I'm like, well, mine just shows red. And I think that is the easiest way, especially when we do these day 4 with Frank Scalishes and he talks about finding guts and he talks about secondary stuff. I think that is the easiest way for a weekend angler who doesn't get off to be able to use their smartphone, to use the internet, to sit in their boat, to even fish from the dang bank and find productive banks that have the right type of stuff around it. And you have no excuse not to have the best mapping because all it is education and some time. And I mean, you can do everything for less than $500.
100%. And I actually did a video for, the Bass Tank the other day. And I was showing one of the features of, the Garmin Vision Plus, water layers. And it's one of those things that I had so many calls just personally, people that I fish with on a daily basis, or often said, do I have that? And I said, yes, you have that. I told you have that. And so it's a really cool thing. It's up on our YouTube and, on our Facebook. I recommend everyone go take a look at it. And yes, those are the type of things, because you've hit the nail on the head. Maps are one of the most underutilized tools in our bag, because to me, we always talk about, forward facing sonar and side imaging and down imaging and 2D. Okay, great. Well, you need to start with your map to look for an area
to do that in.
And so it's kind of a tier as you step down. And so it's putting all of that puzzle together. So yeah, I think that'd be a really good one. And here's I will say this though, this will be one that I will even need to bring a notepad because I won't be able to remember everything off of every map, right off the top of my head. That's how complicated it can be when you're talking about all the maps, but yeah, I think that's very good. Let's do it. I think that would be fantastic.
I just know I'm going to a TVA fishery next, and I've talked to a couple of buddies who are in the tournament, and they'll have like Lake Master pulled up on one iPad, and then they'll be running a sea map or a Navionics on another, and then they'll have like Google Earth historic imagery on their cell phone, and they're going down with all three of those things, and then they're taking the best out of all of them and combining them and saying, well, there's something here and here, this shows up on one and not on the other, so it might be, it's good stuff. Plus, I mean, this is the type of stuff you like to talk about, Scott, and I don't think you've just had a couple hours to just relax and really geek out in the last couple months.
That's true. I started nerd out. I can't even remember what it was. Someone asked me a question. I'm like, ooh, I get to be a nerd out for a bit. And then I did. And they're like, okay, just stop. And so it was fun. But yeah, no, I look forward to it. Absolutely. I think that would be fantastic. So let's do it.
All right. Sounds good. I just wanted to get you on. Like I said, you sponsor the show. And I said, well, there's obviously some changes going on. I think it'd be good for you to jump on and let people know. Full disclosure, it's an odd situation when things change hands, but the Bass Tank is here. It has been here, and it will continue to offer and provide the services that it has. And on your direction, you're going to bump up the stuff that you think is more important and that needs to be focused on as well. So thank you for jumping on. I appreciate it, Scott.
Absolutely, Matt. I appreciate it. We're not going anywhere. We're just putting our heads down and grinding even harder than we ever have. So excited, and we'll get together here in June and do a full show in studio.
All right. Sounds good. See ya.
All right. See ya.
All right. That was Scott Palmer, owner of the Bass Tank. And like I said, we got a lot of fans of John on too. So he's still going to come on and talk about what's going on at the Elite Series. Looking for him to have a strong bounce back week for the Elite Series week coming up this week at Lay Lake. I see Josh Bertrand in the queue. We're going to take our first break. Josh did not get on before I volunteered him on what the entire second half of the show is going to be about. So I'll give him 30 seconds. Josh, we're talking all things guiding, like selecting the right guy. Yeah, he's shaking his head. He can go into that. He knows a minute about that. So it is BTL on a Wednesday, back with reigning U.S. Open champ Josh Bertrand right after this. See.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from Basscat. Feel the rush.
Everything you need, one legendary brand. Top one on Strike King.
So I'm a big guy, a lunker, a two sandwich eating kind of man. And on behalf of all of those bigger, I gotta say it once and for all, it's bad enough that the fish look smaller in our hands. The last thing we should have to worry about is getting quality outdoor clothing that fits. AVCO, any fish, any water.
Shoreline Boat and RV, dock rash, storm damage, collision repair, that deep scratch or gouge from trying to access that secret creek. Shoreline Boat and RV can get your prized possession back in mint condition and looking good on the water, fast. All repairs are done in-house, so they're able to get your boat or RV back to brand new, quickly. All Shoreline's work comes with a rock-solid warranty. Find out more at ShorelineBoatandRV.com. Kansas City, Austin, and Tulsa. All right, welcome back. BTL on a Wednesday. Let's bring Josh Bertrand into the show. What's up, dude?
What's up, man? Can you hear me okay?
Not much. Yeah, I got you good. I was running
Good.
that shoreline. Have you ever just totally screwed up a fiberglass boat? Like just one of those sick to your stomach moments where you're just like, God, do not want to even look at this thing when I take it out of the water.
Yeah, there's two that stand out to me. One was at Ross Barnett. A lot of people have probably messed up their boat at Ross Barnett. But what's so funny about this was, there was an area that I was like kind of in between, should I idle or run? And I decided, hey, I'll just be safe. I'm going to idle. It's practice. And, I idled over a piece of rebar that must have been just right under the surface. And just literally felt it in my bones as, once you're on it, and you just got to keep going. And I just felt it in my bones go down the whole boat. And literally at just an idle, it was $7,000 worth of damage, man. It was unbelievable. I fished the rest of the tournament. The service crews are such cool guys, as you know. And I remember the tournament started the next day, and it was so deep into the fiberglass, I really couldn't fish with the way it was. So the Michael at the time that was working for Nitro waited until like the middle of the night when the fiberglass dried out a little bit, because he didn't want to Bondo it all up when it was still wet. So he waited till the middle of the night for it to dry off a little bit. And then he went and used like a 2-part epoxy. I can't remember exactly what it was, but just to hold it together.
To keep it from delaminating.
Exactly. And what I went and bought a package of that stuff in case it ever happened again, at a tournament. But yeah, he saved my butt. And then one other time I hit the famous bridge in the Elk River, dude.
Oh, you did?
That they warned you about. I had been warned about it 10 times, and I had run by it in several tournaments in the past, dude. And I just one morning, same thing. I forgot I was running into the sun, and they got the 2 red buoys on it. They're danger buoys. Well, I'm so dumb. I thought they were
channel markers.
So I split the buoys. And boom, nailed it so hard, dude. It was ugly too.
I say that I've been running that shoreline boat and RV repair, and my buddy Brock is the GM of the Tulsa store there. So I go in and hang out with him. So we're going to do a couple on location shows. He's done that when I had my ZX190. He was a co-angler back then, and he was still working, and he did the same thing. He brought like a little canister of stuff, and he's like, I get in that boat with all that for those fiberglass dings. And I'm like, why? It's like, because that's how the water catches it and then it pulls it apart. He went around and did it. So now that they sponsor the show, we're going to have him on in the first week of June. We're actually going to be on location from the shoreline, and he's going to go over all the little the insurance and how you do that, and then the dings and how to fix stuff and what's a oh no and what you can just sand out. So all things related to that. So looking forward to that.
That'll be good. So,
all right. I volunteered you for a topic for the show before you came on, and I was thinking about it this morning. There's a lot going on. I feel like there's maybe a renaissance going on right now in the bass guiding industry. It used to be you go out, you pay a guy, he puts you on the fish, you catch him, you go home. That's it. Now there's all sorts of specialties. You got the electronics guys. You've got a bunch of big bass specialists. You're dealing with $300-400 a day trips all the way up to $1,500 a day trips. And this is something that you have made a living at since you were 16, 17 when you started guiding out in Arizona?
I started at 18, yeah, and I did it like full time for about 5 years. And obviously since then, I don't have the time to do it as much as I did, but it's been basically a fun little side gig for me when it's not tournament season since then. And some winters I'll do two trips, and then some winters I'll do 30 of them. It just kind of depends on how much time I have and how I'm feeling. But I really enjoy doing it, dude. And yeah, I mean, I was doing it full time for a while there, doing 200 plus trips a year.
So can we put together like basically a beginner's guide to hiring a beginner's guide to hiring a beginner's book to hiring a guide? Because I think that there's some benefit to it, even if you're an established angler, a weekend angler, established tournament angler. You can find some benefit to it if you go about it correctly. Would you not agree with that?
Oh yeah, dude, everyone learns in different ways, right? And and the clients that I get now are a lot different than the ones I got when I first started out. And I could tell some funny stories, dude, about some of the early clientele that I had, just because, when you're doing it, when you're trying to do it full time as on the guiding side, on the guide side, you're just taking out a much more wide variety of people, right? And now, it's a little bit more specific. Someone who is really trying to learn something, electronics or whatever, it's much more centered around a learning experience than a catching experience. But with the shoe on the other foot, as a client looking to hire a guide, man, you could read a million articles on the internet. You can go out by yourself and do it 100 times. But if you do have the opportunity to get in the boat with someone who is an expert at whatever you're trying to learn, like, dude, the learning curve can literally be one day instead of however long it takes. And everyone learns differently. But I know for me, and even just going fishing with friends and stuff, learning to fish around the country, they weren't guide trips, obviously, but like, man, if I was in a new region and I had a buddy in Florida and he's like, man, you've never fished grass like this after the tournament. Let's go out one day and let me show you my spin on how to do this. And that can help you so much. So yeah, it just goes back to like a hands-on learning is so much more effective than trying to figure it out off the water, watching YouTube videos or reading articles on the internet.
Couldn't agree anymore. We're going to go through kind of the different types of guide trips that are available. But first, what are your thoughts? This is a sticky subject for me. What are your thoughts on hiring guides to prepare you? Like if I hired a guide to show me for a tournament that I have upcoming, as long as it's legal. I've always thought that was a weird thing. Or is that a way to effectively learn a body of water?
I mean, dude, I don't know. That is a sticky one and a weird one. And obviously a lot of the tournament circuits, especially all the pro circuits, have rules against that, right? So yeah, I mean, dude, if you're a pro, it's obviously a huge no-no. And I think it's looked down upon and it's illegal. If you're a guy that fishes 10 times a year and wants to go fish a big bass tournament on Lake of the Ozarks out of state, I don't see any problem with it. I mean, you're not, if it's within the rules and dude, you just want to go have a good time. You don't normally travel and fish. You don't fish a lot of tournaments to begin with. I think that's probably pretty harmless. So there's probably, it probably depends on the situation, but I would say, if you're trying to fish at a high level, I don't think it's a good way to having someone go out and show you and put you on fish isn't a good way to learn how to get on fish. So it all depends on the deal.
All right. I've got basically 4 reasons to hire a guide. This is how we're going to break them down. One is you just want to have fun and catch fish. This might be you don't really care how big they are. You want to just go out on the lake. You're in town for vacation or something. You hire someone out. You just want to go catch them. There's that whole group, right? You're not there to really learn anything. You're there just for the enjoyment of the entire experience.
Yep.
Fair assessment on one?
100%.
Okay. One would be to learn a new lake or technique, kind of like what you talked about with the Lake of the Ozarks or that. Or you move to an area, let's say you move out west, you have no idea how to get out on Havasu, and for just a day or two, you can, like you said, cut down that learning curve. Then the next, so that's the second reason.
Get
Third
that all
reason,
the time.
Okay, would be to catch a fish, the fish of a lifetime, to achieve a goal, something that you've always wanted to do. That's what I talked about, like the Hill Country Hammers, Rick Harris, and those guys down there. Some of the big time guys like down at OHIV right now, where it's like, hey, I've been after a 10-pounder for 20 years, and I can pay money to increase my odds to not only learn, but have a shot at the fish of a lifetime and still catch the dang thing. Right.
Yep. And what's crazy about that one, dude, is and huge props to those guys that are actually making that happen for customers.
Yeah.
Because you want to talk about a pressure packed situation as a guide to have someone traveling out to you and basically expecting to catch the biggest bass of their life. God, dude, like that's crazy to me. And I know they're in a special situation and they're able to do it often, and I'm sure not all the time. But yeah, you've got to be really, I'm sure those guys have to do a good job of setting the expectations. And there's so much that you can't control, dude, and sometimes it could be a million things, as we all know as fishermen. All the listeners understand too, but like that's a tricky, probably the trickiest guide trip of all. We have especially big bait fishing. That's so difficult. Big bait fishing it's a difficult style of fishing, and to take a fisherman who normally doesn't do that and have them do that and try to catch the fish of their lifetime, God, dude, that's tough.
A little bit more nerve-wracking than even a derby, because it's just you and the derby. Now you've got the guide, service, the client, they're $1,000 in, hotel rooms, and they expect to see something that you got to grab with two hands to get it over the gunnel. It's
a different type of pressure. And like, I know that you were going to dip your feet into guiding at one point, dude. And we had talked about it, and yeah, you were literally nervous about people that were going to be, you didn't want to let anyone down. Right. Mm-hmm. And I feel the same way at times, and there's a lot of pressure in a tournament. I mean, you're out there in the tournament and you get halfway through the day and you're not catching them. Everyone's watching at home, all your friends, all your sponsors, and like there's a pit in your stomach in that situation that you can't really describe unless you've been there. But then, yeah, when you're standing on the boat and these people spend their hard-earned money to go fish with you and you're not catching them and it's the middle of the day, there's a different pit in your stomach, and they're totally different, but they're both mm-hmm. pits.
Yeah. And then the fourth one would be purely educational. That's an electronics only, a specific bait. Anything of fishing or catching fish is purely a bonus. There's a number of these specialist guys who have gotten in, and they'll even jump in your boat, take you out of the lake, run you around, show you how to use the active target or the live scope, your mapping, your electronics, your side imaging. And I guess that would be a form of guiding as well too, would it not?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I would 100% consider it that. So that's a great deal. Everyone wins there. The customer gets so much knowledge out of it, less pressure on the guide because it's sharing information and not having to necessarily produce fish obviously is less pressure, but I think it's a great deal.
Did I leave anything out? Are there any other types of guides or experiences or anything that I left out other than those four, Josh?
I would say for most serious fishermen, that's most of it. I'm sure if I'd really racked my brain over the years, especially early on, we had some random other reasons on why people wanted to go out on the lake and go fishing. But I would say that those are probably the main ones, especially for anyone listening here.
All right. What makes obviously aside from catching fish, if it's a fish and catching, but what makes a good trip as a guide? Just some general things. What makes a good trip in your opinion?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think, one thing that we learned early on was like every customer has different hopes and expectations of the day. So I think it's really important when that trip starts to ask what that client wants out of the day, because one guy might want to go out there and learn something specific. And if you don't ask him about that and learn what his goals are for the day, and you go out and try to accomplish something totally different, it's not going to be a good trip. So I think really a good guide is just one that can adapt to whatever that client is hoping to do. And if it's reasonable, then they go do it. And if it's unreasonable, which I mean, some people show up with unrealistic expectations, of what they might catch or what they might be able to do over the course of the day, and then finding a good way to bring those expectations back to reality and then, go from there. But I mean, yeah, of course, a good guide is a guide that can constantly be on fish, as good as possible, but someone who's good with the clients and can adapt to the different types of clients. That's huge.
So it definitely sounds like you have to clear. I'm just writing down. We're going to end up with a list by the end here. So now we're going to have the different types of guides. If I think that'd be handy. We're going to clarify our expectations for the day. That's key. Between the guide and the client. Like if I hire you on Havasu and I said, Josh, I drove all the way out here. I want a 6-pound smallie, an 8-pound largemouth on a frog, and a 5-pound red ear. We're going to have to clarify how realistic that actually is. So at the end of the day, I'm not like, I told him what the hell I wanted. I didn't catch a 5-pound red ear or a 6-pound smallmouth. What a loser.
Yeah, we only caught a 5-pound smallie, dude. And it's disappointing, right? So if you can bring those expectations down, bring you back to earth a little bit, dude, it's such a big deal as a guide to just be careful. You might have gone out and caught 100 fish yesterday, but it's really risky to tell that to your client the next day, because we know fishing's never the same 2 days in a row. And, if they're expecting 100 fish, they're going to be disappointed even if they catch 50. So always starting that trip, as like, hey, this is a great lake. It's got some good potential. Fishing's been a little bit tough lately, but we're going to have a good day. We're going to enjoy it. And, hopefully we catch some. And then, hey, when you do catch some, everyone's happy about it.
Let's say you are on the boat with the guide. What are some key phrases or words that the guy's not going to be like, dude, you're here and it's freaking brutal. Like if we catch one, I'm going to be elated. They're never going to tell you that. But what are some key phrases or words that guides may or may not use that lets you know might be a little bit of a tougher bite that day?
Oh, dude. Well, yeah, I don't know about key phrases. I mean, excuses.
Yeah.
As fishermen, we all have excuses, right? But I'd say just being honest and laying it all out there, like, hey, explain what's going on. What I love to do, even with clients that aren't like super, super experienced fishermen, is I love to explain what I think is going on underwater and what's going on with the weather. Hey, this is what's been going on with the weather this week. That's going to dictate maybe this, maybe that. You never know exactly what's going to happen, but we've had, we're sitting here, it's post frontal. The fish bit really well before this front came through. Today it's sunny, post frontal. The pressure is high. Typically that doesn't bode for like the best fishing, but what these fish do in this situation is a lot of times they kind of clam up. You got to fish a lot slower. That's why we're going to be drop shotting today. The drop shot's the best way to catch them. If there's any way that we're going to be able to catch them, it's going to be on this. And, just explain what's happening with the situation. And I don't know. Other than that, though, dude, it's, the excuses start to come out about halfway through the day if the fishing's slow. But you never know. I mean, there's days when you fish where you expect it to be bad, and it's great. Yeah. Even as tournament fishermen too, you just sometimes the fish do what you expect, and some days they just have you scratching your head, and you're like, man, I just didn't see this coming one way or the other.
You mentioned that about the drop shot. I think something else important when you're looking for a guide is to do your research on your guides. Like, let's say you are a tournament guy and you're offering water guiding. Well, you're very good with the finesse. There's other guys that are very good with glide baits. There's other guys that are known for their ledge fishing. There's some guys that are spotted bass guys on lakes. So to figure out what you want before you just go to a random guide and clarify your expectations, it makes it a lot easier if you kind of hone in on, if you kind of figure out that whole realm too, right? Because if I want to drop shot it out of the West, I'm going to be like, hey, I'd love to get on the boat with Josh. I watch tournaments. I know how good he is with it. I've seen what he's done with it from New York all the way out to California.
Yeah. I wouldn't be a good guy to take someone swim bait fishing, or with a giant glide bait or something like that. So yeah, 100% on that, man. I mean, doing your research, and it's a lot easier these days with the internet, but nothing beats a call, man. Nothing beats a call. And you just hope that guide is going to be honest about it. And, I don't know, dude, it's, if a guide is really experienced and really good, he is going to be honest with it, because he doesn't want to be out there in that situation where you get halfway through the day and the customer realizes that you were BSing them on the phone, and they don't want to go out there and have a bad day.
So can you call and like vet out your guides? Like just be like, hey, I'm thinking of considering hiring a guide. You chat with it. If it doesn't feel right, you just say, thanks, man. I'll let you know if I decide I want to book. Like, would you recommend that guys call around and not just take the first guide that they call up?
I think you have to. I mean, it's one of those things where I've definitely noticed that some guides have like booking straight off their website where you can book without even calling, and that's cool. But for me, if I was a client, I would definitely want to talk to the guide and ask those questions. I mean, you're spending like you said, $500 to $1,000 in some cases, and a full day of your time, man. So like that's something that I would like to have a conversation about before starting out, for sure.
The next thing that would always get me, and like I said, I've done like my dad and me and my uncle, we had like a day of guiding up in Canada with this guy named Greg, who was phenomenal. Like he was an amazing guide. That's like a guide. That's all he'd like done up there was guide. Nice. But then he had also never like drop shot a live minnow. So we were holding these little jigs right off the bottom for walleye. And I was like, well, why don't you just tie a drop shot on it? Then you know exactly how far. And like literally he was like, show me how to tie that. And then he had us all drop. Like I thought that was an amazing guide afterwards. To kind of, I'm not saying that I taught him anything. It just made it easier because we were in like 25 foot of water. But at the end of the day, like, is your tip determined? Like, as a guy who's hired a guide, are you tipping per person? Are you tipping based on a percentage of how much it was? Are you tipping based on how successful you were? Like, I hear guys that are like, oh, I only got a $20 tip. I hear guys who get hundreds of dollars of tips for everyone. Like, but pull the curtain back on how to tip your guide and how much it should be, Josh.
Yeah, that's a good question. All those things matter, right? I mean, you shouldn't expect as a guide a great tip if you don't have a great day. But yeah, again, you can't 100% control the fishing. So it's probably, it comes from a lot of different places. But, I've experienced, just like you said, nothing. And I've experienced some great tips, and really, I don't know, if I was going fishing with somebody, I just try to tip across the board, almost whatever it is. I try to tip 20-ish%, right? If it's awesome, you can go up a little higher. If it's not awesome, you can go lower. But I don't know. I think, if you're in that same realm that you're tipping at a restaurant or something like that, I think that's fair. And I think that's kind of what you see more often than not. Hey man, if the guide did his very best, he worked hard, when a guy is working hard or when he's just mailing it in and watching the clock and waiting for the day to be over. So you got to take that into consideration. I don't think it's ever expected. It's a tip. You appreciate it if you do get one. But I would say typically in that same, you would tip someone at a restaurant or something percentage wise is cool for sure.
You're an Abu guy. I'm sure you've got Abu rods, reels, 100% trilene, all rigged up. What are your thoughts when a guy rolls down with 8 of his own rods to bring in the boat? Like, what are your thoughts on bringing your own equipment or not as a guide?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally cool. I always tell people that I have everything they would need, but yeah, I mean, if someone's got stuff that they really like, or maybe it's someone who doesn't fish that much, they fish 4 times a year, they spend a lot of money on these rods and reels, and they just literally want to be able to use them. That's great, and and sometimes too, like if someone's newer to fishing, they want you to check out their stuff. Hey man, can I bring this stuff? Let me know if it's any good. You might, dude, I mean, they'll show up with a bait caster and there's 10-pound braid on it, and you're like, okay, or vice versa, a spinning rod with 40-pound braid. It's like, yeah, dude, you got to, you probably want to do a little switcheroo on this stuff. And, it's all good, but yeah, if you think that they have a better chance to catch fish on your stuff, then yeah, at that point say, hey man, maybe you should try my rod, but I don't have any issue with that at all.
Okay. Is it also true that you want to book as far in advance as you can to get the guide? Because the premier guides, I mean, book up like that when it comes to it because of repeat clients, and all of a sudden their books are just, and it's hard to get on the water with them. And then if you're like last minute, you got the guy who's like, Is that necessarily true, or is there a way to get in on like last minute cancellations with a guy? Because I mean, I know stuff happens, right?
Yeah, but I would say overall, dude, yeah, early is the deal for sure. And you just can't predict, but it's a seasonal business. No matter who you're going with, if he's good, they're going to be booked up during season, which is usually the spring. Now I know those hog hunters down, in Texas and stuff, that's more like of a midwinter deal. And so that's a little bit different, but it's seasonal. If you're going down to Florida, winter time. But usually spring is going to be the busiest season. If you want to go out in November, dude, you could probably call the week of and get a trip with a good guide. But if you want to go prime time, you got to book it a year early.
Do most guys do lunch, or is it your job to bring all that stuff?
It depends on the guide. On a half-day trip, I don't really mess with that, but I do feel like a full-day trip, it's good to offer to bring lunch. And, it's sometimes, man, a lot of the lakes that we have out here have pretty cool restaurants on the water, and it's a nice way to break the day up too. Halfway through the day, you run in, sit down for an hour, and get a fresh start the second half of the day. That's fun too. But I think it's good for the guide to do that.
I've got this down too. The full versus half day. This has always been a conundrum to me because it always seems like it's a little bit better deal for the full day, and then it's like, well, a half day, if you can talk about the difference between booking a full and a half day, what you get more out of a full day, when a half day is beneficial to you, and vice versa.
Out here, a lot of times I prefer to do full days because, again, I think as a client, a full day is better. You have
explain why.
I think a lot of times 4 hours flies by, and think about how many days you guys have gone fishing, and it took you until the afternoon to figure out the bite. No matter how well you know the lake, no matter what, hey, the morning was just slow. We finally dialed it in around 1 o'clock. Man, a half day trip, you don't even get that opportunity, right? Like you don't even get to the point where you figure out the bite, and it just flies by. So if you're out there to learn electronics or something like that, dude, you can easily accomplish that in 4 hours. But if you're really truly trying to go catch fish, you kind of need to give it that full day. Now there's situations like the heat of the summer. You don't want to be out there for 8 hours in the Arizona heat or the Florida heat or even the Texas heat, Oklahoma heat in the middle of the summer. So that's where a half day is really handy. And as a guide, again, I'm not running that many trips anymore, but I remember when I was doing it full time, the half days were nice in the spring because you could stack up 2 a day, and you'd make a lot more money doing that. But on the client side, I think that full day just gives you so much more opportunity to see more of the lake and to run into those fish at some point.
Is it cool? I'm just rapid firing questions that I've always wanted to know.
Keep them coming, dude.
Is it cool if, like, let's say I hire you as a guide for the day, and I say beforehand, dude, I'd really like to try to catch some on topwater. I love catching them on topwater. Can we try that first thing in the morning? Because I know I've talked to situations where it's like, man, we were on this lake and it's known for its topwater, and the guy went out and we just started dragging Texas rigs right off the bat, and it was so boring and I wish we had fished. Is it okay to like ask that stuff, or are you going to rely on your guide that he's going to put you in the best scenario possible, and that's why you're paying him, is to put you in a chance to succeed, and therefore it's not your job to be like, hey, can we go throw top? But then you're also paying for a service. So what's the deal on that? Like, if I want to start out,
it's kind of it's an interesting question, because I think it could go either way on that. You are paying for the deal, and you went out there because you want to throw topwater. But I mean, I will say, dude, like if I'm on this lake all the time and a guy from Minnesota shows up and starts making suggestions to me, like I might take a little offense to it, dude.
Okay.
And it is what it is. Like, I mean, the guide probably knows better than the client.
Does that happen a lot? Fair amount. Well, you're always
it
on,
happens,
though, so
dude.
that doesn't really.
I mean, it's I don't know. It doesn't happen that often anymore,
Okay.
but I mean, it has happened, dude, on slow days, especially on a slower day. And I mean, hey, dude, sometimes they're right. You know, what's hilarious, dude, is when it happens a lot with kids that kids, dude, their patience level a lot of times is lower, right? And you'll be explaining how to work a bait. You know, hey man, you cast it out, you do this, and it doesn't work for 10 minutes. So they start doing it their own way. And you'll tell them, hey man, if I really think your odds are going to be better if you fish it like this, and they do it for 5 minutes and then start doing it their own way. And then the kiss of death is when they catch a fish doing it their own way, dude.
Told you.
And then you're like, yep, here we go. I just lost all credibility. And this kid's going to do it his own way the rest of the day. He's not going to catch anything else, but it's happened. It's happened before for sure.
Your thoughts on live bait versus artificial guide trips? Because that's no pun intended. That's a whole different can of worms too, especially when you get down into the Florida and that. I mean, those are totally different expectations on like a shiner trip versus a crankbait and Texas rig trip, right?
Yeah, I think you're just talking about a lot of times two totally different types of guides, right? I mean, if you want to go down to Florida and you want to learn how to go tournament fish down there, going out with a dude in his center console that fishes shiners most of the time isn't the way to go. But if you want to take your family or even just some buddies and catch the biggest bass possible, going out with that dude with the shiners is the way to go. So that's just vetting your guide. I think they're both trips are awesome, but they're totally different. You know, you're going to learn, the artificial deal. The artificial guides are probably maybe a better opportunity to learn how to do that. But just straight catching fish. Me personally, man, if I was going to go out with a guide, I would have a blast fishing live bait. I have nothing against it.
I've always wanted to do that.
Yeah,
I've always wanted to do a shiner trip.
It kills me, to watch how easily they catch fish sometimes. It's amazing. I'll never forget, dude, being in Harney Pond in Okeechobee. Kevin Van Dam's over one shoulder. Brett Height's over the other shoulder. Jacob Porosnik's over the other shoulder.
Gosh.
We're not catching anything, dude. Nothing. And a shiner boat pulls in, family of 5, and they just start railing fish all around us. And it's like, golly, it's literally like cheating sometimes using live bait.
But it's fun, and you're there for the experience and to catch it. And you can put the whole family in it, and your 10-year-old can catch one, and your grandma can catch one, and you can catch one, and everyone goes home happy.
It's awesome. 100%, man.
All right, you good to stick around? Did I miss anything on the guiding before we move on to some actual tournament fishing here?
I don't think so, man. No. And yeah, dude, I got 20 minutes if that's cool with you. So I got to take my daughter to school in 20 minutes. So
we'll take a real quick break.
Minutes.
When we come back, I do want to talk about your top 5 finish in heavy hitters. Because didn't you caught were you catching giants on a spinning rod?
Yeah, dude. I did all on a spinning rod. So
yeah,
that'd be cool.
We'll talk about that when we come back. Josh Bertrand on BTL on a Wednesday. We'll be back right after this.
The great thing about the new Sensation soft plastics from Big Bite Baits, heavily scented, super soft, buoyant, comes in 7 great new shapes. I've got a couple of them of my signature series, the cliffhanger worm and the ramtail craw. Great for a flipping jig, football jig, swim jig, all that. Several other great shapes. Really excited about it. We've worked over the last year, catches fish all over the country, and I think it's going to catch fish for people everywhere you try it.
The Spro Little John crankbait has been around for almost 15 years, and it is one of my go-to crankbaits whenever I need a fish in the boat, so you can never have enough new colors. That's why Spro's coming out with a handful of new colors, including Pearl Shad, which has this bleached out white look, but it's got this pearlescent, really, really pretty. We've got Copper Shad, which looks amazing in the water. It's got that purple flake on the back, really, really pops in the water. And then if you want some real pop, we've got Sparkle Shad, nothing but sparkles all over this thing. And then last but not least, we've got the matte Sexy Shad, just a really different looking color for a crankbait. So you want to give them a little different look, that matte Sexy Shad is definitely the one to go with. All these colors are available in the original Little John and the MD.
All right, back with Josh Bertrand, reigning and defending U.S. Open champ. That still sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
Yeah, man. It's easy to forget. Just every tournament, you're only as good as your last tournament, right? So
nah, there's a couple
it's been
tournaments
ages
that
ago.
stick with you. U.S. Open champ sticks with you. That's a career deal, man. You'll always be a U.S. Open champ. I don't give a damn what lake it's on or when it was or how. I mean, that's the U.S. Open. Always has
So are
been.
you, bro?
Always will be. Well,
2 U.S.
clearly,
Open champs here, dude.
AAA does not count.
Yeah, it does.
No, it doesn't.
You won, dude.
No, the hardest part in bass fishing is decision making and finding the fish. And it doesn't matter. There's 10,000 people who can catch bass. There's very few people who can find those bass to catch. We just did a whole segment on guides. What are guiding good at? Guiding is good at finding the fish. That's what you're paying the guide to do, is to put you around the fish. If it was just catching the fish, anybody could go out and be a hero.
Dude, I hear you. Well, yeah, we'll roll into whatever you want to talk about. If we have time, I've got a wild guiding story, dude.
You got to start with that, and then we could roll into the rest of it. But everyone wants to hear the wild guiding story.
Nothing to do with anything that you asked, but I thought, when you brought it up, I was like, man, I got guiding stories like crazy, and this one sticks with me. I told it recently to a actual guide client of mine. So, anyways, when we had first started our guide service back in the day, we were doing anything to get busy and get trips going. I mean, the first year is always going to be tough, right? So a friend had suggested, hey man, have you ever thought about advertising on Craigslist? And yeah, dude, everyone's thinking, oh man. We're like, oh, we'll try it. And we did it. And we start getting a handful of like good trips, normal people come out, and we have good days, and it's like, wow, this Craigslist is no one's advertising a guide service on Craigslist. So dude, it's working out great. And then one night we get this call, and this guy, I answer, and the guy goes, I want 5 boats tomorrow morning at Lake Pleasant. And it's like a Friday night in the middle of the busiest season of the year. And it's like, I'm sorry, sir, this is our busy season. We're not gonna be able to accommodate you tomorrow, but later in the month, we do have some openings. And he goes, oh man, that's BS. This is, you guys aren't professionals. You're not prepared to whatever. And he gives us a hard time and hangs up. So like a week later, the same guy calls, can recognize his voice, and he books out for like 5 boats for like 15 guys a couple weeks in advance. So we booked a trip, and they're going to have the boats jam packed. We're going to go striper fishing at Lake Pleasant. And typically we meet off site, and we did fishing licenses at the time. You couldn't get them online quite as easily. So it was pretty easy to be a dealer. People would show up and fill out their licenses. Well, there's 15 guys. One out of 15 was able to write. So, and they're all adults. The other 14, we had multiple books, but they didn't know how to read and write, dude.
Yeah.
So we're thinking, whoa, that's a pretty big red flag right there. And we're sitting there. One guy, it takes him like an hour to fill out everyone's fishing license. And we're chatting, and it's like, yeah, what do you guys do? They're all part of a family. It's like, what do you guys do for a living? And one of them said, I sell commodities. And we're like, okay. Or they say, we sell commodities. And it's like, okay, we'll leave that at that also. And we'll move on. We drive to the lake. They follow us to the lake. And one of the other guides that's doing the trip is Rob Vanderkoy, who does English Happy Hour podcast with me. Rob. And Scooter, who I had started the guide service with. We got 5 guides. Well, we get out, and the guy in Rob's boat, dude, one of the older guys, I'll never forget Rob telling me after the day was over, they get the boat in the water, and they go to get on plane to go to the first spot, and the guy starts screaming at Rob, slow this thing down, slow this thing down. He thought he was trying to suffocate him because he couldn't breathe in the wind of the boat that was going like 30 miles an hour. So Rob had to idle everywhere all day long, dude. He couldn't get his boat on pad. And then I remember telling my client, yeah, we're going to start down at the dam. The guy says, no, we're not going to the dam. I'm not fishing by the dam. So, and I'm going back and forth, man, that's where the fish have been really biting. If we want a chance to catch them, we're going to go down there. Well, he absolutely refused to go fish by the dam. So we had to fish other stuff. And it's just a miserable day fishing with these guys. Super disrespectful, super rude. every single place we would go, they would crack open a fresh, Coke or whatever, and then they would just leave it there. When it was time to bait their hook, because we're striper fishing, so we're using cut bait.
Yeah.
They wouldn't say anything. They would just dangle their hook in your face and look the other way and wait. They'd just expect you to bait their hook without saying anything. So we fish. We're having a slow morning, dude. Finally, one of the guides gets on some fish, and we all go to this area and we all start catching them. And we have an epic final hour of the day. But it's time to go because they had booked a half day, and we have another trip in the afternoon. And it's like, okay, guys, all right, that was fun, but it's time to head back to the dock. We got another trip this afternoon. And one of the guys in the other boats goes, the trip just started an hour ago. We just started catching fish an hour ago. And there's like a confrontation on one of the other boats. This guy has to get in the client's face and tell him, listen, dude, this is how it is. Everyone's pissed that they have to go in. They just literally caught 50 stripers per boat. We get back to the dock, and instead of one person paying for the whole trip to make it easy, every single dude is going to pull out their $97.45 to a T. So we're going through all this cash, and half of them are short. It was a disaster. I'll never forget those guys, dude. It was the trip. I think it was a gypsy family or something, man.
Did you ever figure out what kind of commodities they dealt with?
I don't know, dude, but it was a gypsy family is kind of what we had figured out. And no, we don't know what they did.
They take the
sold.
stripers with them?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Maybe they sold them, dude.
Yeah, that's an interesting story.
Yeah.
All right. You got 5 minutes. I do want to get your thoughts on, you guys just went to a Big Bass Factory, and Alton Jones Jr. blew it away on the final day there. There were a lot of big fish caught on spinning rods, though, and you guys were in Louisiana. Have you noticed the trend on spinning rods in non-traditional areas? You've been throwing them for a long time, but have you noticed other guys picking up on that over the last 3 years specifically and throwing them where they would never have even had one in the boat before?
Yeah, dude. I definitely think you're onto something there. It's just sometimes these fish are getting more and more pressured, and electronics are getting better. So a spinning rod does pair well with using your electronics, finesse fishing, stuff like that. But even in our case, a lot of guys were fishing shallow. Just that lake, that Caney Creek Lake, is an awesome body of water. But it's only about 5,000 acres. And just the pressure of the guys being out there that many days in a row, you just didn't feel like you'd catch one on a big bait. Those fish were so smart. And I will say the one thing that fish never get tired of is a drop shot rig. You talk about some of the pressured bodies of water where I fish at home, but the Tennessee River, you look at a lake like Chickamauga, and you've got your 20 mega spots on that lake that have a boat on them all the time, from May all the way through August when the fish are on the ledges. When the big swim bait came out, or when the hollow belly swim bait came out, they crushed that. When a big crankbait was a big deal, they crushed that. When the big scrounger came out, they crushed that. Well, they get sick of all that, right? You can catch one or two on those things, and they can be key fish, so they're still valuable to have in your boat. But you cannot sit on those schools anymore and catch fish after fish with that. But what you can catch fish after fish on is a drop shot. They just never get sick of it, dude. It's crazy. And even our little lakes at home here, a bait will come out. It'll work real well for a couple of years, and the fish get conditioned to it, but they never get conditioned to a drop shot. They never get conditioned to a Nico rig. So those seem to be the things that guys are reaching for when it gets really, really tough. And, obviously there are times when a big bait is going to be better for big fish, but if you know where that big fish is at and you can put a bait in front of him, he's still going to eat a drop shot. A big one's still going to eat a drop shot. And that was just the situation last week. Now, when we went to Bussy Break, the cover was way thicker. You just couldn't use a spinning rod there. It wasn't even feasible. But spinning rod definitely played big time at Caney Creek.
That's good stuff. You still with the Arizona Fishing Guides?
Yeah. So any trips I do, I usually do run through those. So yeah, great to give them a shout out, Scooter and the crew over there. If you are looking to fish in Arizona,
Like fall and winter stuff. Or are you going to do any midsummer death defying guide trips?
Yeah. Fall and winter for me, but if you're in town in spring or anything, there's a bunch of great guides, so definitely drop them a line. But yeah, if you're looking to get out, you could either drop them a line, or you could always hit me up on social media as well, and I can help you with dates.
And Anglers Happy Hour, you're not as regular as you need to be, Josh.
I know,
you need to still do that. You need to get back on the regular trade, but still putting out quality content. Anglers Happy Hour podcast. If you listen to BTL on any of the podcast platforms, you need to just jump over, download the Anglers Happy Hour too. Really good stuff. I didn't really get into the guide stories because there's a ton of them that are on Anglers Happy Hour. You can just go back and search through it. You and Rob are the two guides on that show, and you guys have a bunch of hellacious stories that are on there. So everybody loves a good guide story, plus education, interviews, breakdowns of your season, and techniques, and a lot of West Coast stuff too, that kind of Arizona deal. So
thank you, man. Yeah, appreciate it big time. That'd be awesome.
All right, I will let you take off and take care of dad duties, but I greatly appreciate you stopping by BTL, Josh.
Hey, man, it's a pleasure. It's always an honor, dude. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing, man. I'm a big
All right, good
fan.
luck at Gunnersville. I'm sure you'll have the drop shot out there.
100%, dude.
All right, see you.
Thank you. See you.
All right, that was Josh Bertrand. Like I said, just kind of a little bit of a primer when it comes to guiding, hiring a guide, what to expect, what not to expect. Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? Good stuff. All right, that is all. I think that's all. Let me double check. Yeah, that's all we got for today. Scott Palmer from the Bass Tank. Big shout out to him for jumping on BTL, and then also Josh Bertrand. We will be back tomorrow on a Thursday, live and in person, with the man, the myth, and the legend, Frank Scalish. This has been BTL. We'll talk to everybody tomorrow. See ya.